Section C. Compound and complex sentences.
Compound sentences are merely two or more simple sentences stitched together by a conjunction or a mark of punctuation, like a colon, semicolon, or a dash.
Remember, a conjunction is simply a word that links together parts of a sentence.
For more information on how to use these extra nifty punctuation marks, be sure to check out The Untamed World of Punctuation.
Let's look at the following sentence. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine.
This sentence is really just two smaller sentences hooked together by a conjunction, in this case, and. When a sentence is used as a component in another, bigger, fancier sentence, we call it a clause.
When we look at the sentence, it's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine, we see that it consists of two clauses, each of which can stand as its own sentence.
Sentence 1. It's the end of the world as we know it. Sentence 2. I feel fine.
When a clause can stand as a sentence on its own like these two, we call it an independent clause.
Now, say you've got two perfectly good independent clauses and you want to stick them together to create a compound sentence. Well, don't feel like you have to use a conjunction. Try one of three handy little punctuation marks, either the colon, semicolon, or the dash.
If you do decide to use one of these punctuation marks, it's important that you use the appropriate one for your sentence construction needs.
The colon is used when the second independent clause helps explain the first one. Suppose we want to connect these two sentences. I love my two sisters. They bake me pie.
Although this is correct, we have an opportunity to combine these two simple sentences to form a compound sentence. Since the second sentence elaborates and helps explain the first, we can use a colon.
A colon is a punctuation mark we use very specifically. The colon tells us that whatever follows the colon helps to explain what came before the colon.
The second sentence, they bake me pie, explains why I love my two sisters. So we can write, I love my two sisters, colon, they bake me pie.
Our next punctuation mark, the semicolon, means roughly end.
If we go back to the compound sentence we looked at earlier, it's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine, we can instead write, it's the end of the world as we know it, semicolon, I feel fine. See how the semicolon basically just means and?
Finally, a dash is used when the second clause is a sort of reversal of the first clause or contains some surprising element. Look at this sentence.
There are many options for someone interested in purchasing a quality comb. I usually find wonderful combs in the dumpster.
Again, here we combine two independent clauses to create one compound sentence. There are many options for someone interested in purchasing a quality comb, dash, I usually find wonderful combs in the dumpster. We choose to use a dash because the second clause carried a twist on the first one.
So, we can combine simple sentences to create compound sentences one of four ways. We can use a conjunction, a colon, a semicolon, or a dash.
Now we know exactly how to create a compound sentence, and we know several ways to do it. But before we go on to talk about complex sentences, we must bring up a common pitfall that can nail us when we're dealing with these sentences.
A frequent error in SEAE is to break two clauses into two sentences, but to keep the conjunction. Teachers and bosses will have their red ink pens poised and ready to nail you for this one.
This mistake is called a sentence fragment. It's what you get when you try to pass off a portion of a sentence that cannot stand on its own as a complete sentence.
Suppose we want to separate this compound sentence into two simple sentences. My pet Komodo dragon is as gentle as a lamb because he has no teeth. When we separate these two clauses, we must remove the word because, or we will get one complete sentence and one sentence fragment. My pet Komodo dragon is as gentle as a lamb is the complete sentence. Because he has no teeth is the sentence fragment. So we need to make the last sentence just, he has no teeth.
We've talked about simple sentences, and we've tackled the compound sentence with its notorious fragment trap. Now it's time for the complex sentence.
Up to this point, we've been dealing with independent clauses, or complete sentences that can stand alone. A dependent clause, however, is a clause that cannot stand on its own and is dependent on the sturdier independent clause. In fact, if you try to pass a dependent clause off as a complete sentence, they'll end up in that same old fragment trap we talked about earlier.
A complex sentence can be created by combining a dependent clause with an independent clause. Here's a complex sentence. See if you can identify both the dependent and independent clause.
Although Tom sleeps regularly, he is constantly tired. First, we must break down the sentence into its two clauses. In this case, although Tom sleeps regularly, and he is constantly tired. The second clause can stand on its own, but the first one can't. If we just say, although Tom sleeps regularly, we're really left hanging, waiting for the continuation of the thought. So this is a dependent clause.
A compound sentence is a sentence that consists of two or more simple sentences. These simple sentences are joined by either a conjunction or a punctuation mark, like a colon, semicolon, or a dash.
Complex sentences can contain an independent clause and a dependent clause. An independent clause is a clause that can stand by itself as a sentence. A dependent clause cannot stand by itself as a separate sentence.
Now that you're up to speed, let's learn a little bit more about that versatile language we speak.